So we are going to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda are the minutes from March 18th. Is there a motion?
We'll move to approve subject to modification.
Is there a second? Okay. Page 1.
Yeah.
Page 2.
Or see Cass's name is misspelled number 8. Or is it number 9 actually? Right, isn't it? Oh, no, it's number 8. Yep, you're right. And that same one, there's actually a double period right before that.
Isn't there a musical term for that? Rest or something?
It's a rest.
It's a rest. Okay.
It's a full note.
Page 3.
Under number 12, I was having trouble with Mr. Wells will investigate the issue further. I think Mr. Wells understands the issue quite well, and maybe what I remember was he said he was planning to attend the next executive committee to discuss their concerns.
Yeah.
And number 13, I actually made the motion and Ellie seconded.
Subject to those modifications, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There are no nays. Actually, is Ellie participating remotely?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Aye.
Did she vote?
Did you vote aye?
Yes.
Okay, so, because otherwise it would have been 4-1 and that would have messed everything up. Okay, next public comment. This is a moment where people in the audience or people participating remotely have an opportunity to make a comment. It can be on something that's on the agenda, but it does not have to be. So are there any people who wish to make a public comment in the room? Seeing no one. Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope, no one online for public comment. Someone wants for a different agenda item, but
Okay.
no one for it now.
Great. Okay, next on the agenda, interviews for the Recreation and Parks Committee. So I know Susan's in the room and Carrie is participating remotely.
Yeah, Carrie, I'll connect you on Zoom right now. I'll let you rejoin as a panelist so you can share your audio and video.
Is she ready? Okay. Hello. Hi, Carrie. Welcome, and thank you for participating and subjecting yourself to our questions. Generally, we start by asking people if they have, if they'd just like to introduce themselves and say a couple things about themselves and why they're interested in the committee position. So I'll leave it to you.
Awesome, thank you. And I apologize for my lighting I'm noticing right now. I'll just call it a beautiful vacation glow. First and foremost, thank you for letting me join virtually. I greatly appreciate it. We're heading on a flight at 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. So this is our wrap up quickly. So this is a nice end to our vacation. As you mentioned, my name is Carrie Shackett. I am a proud Williston resident and mom of 2 little girls. And I would call myself a Vermont transplant. I'm a born and raised masshole, but I came here in 2006 to go to school and I never ever left. I fell in love with the community and then eventually fell in love with my husband, and he is a 7th generation Vermonter. So we are here for the long haul. In my day job, I am the co-director of the Career Collaborative at Champlain College, where it's my job to make connections between community members, students, employers, parents, national employers, and relationship building is something that I get to do every day there, which is beautiful and exciting and the favorite part of my job. The reason that I'm really interested in this role is some of my fondest memories as a child were participating in my own Parks and Rec department. I did every camp under the sun, from knitting camp to quilt making to lamp making to magic camp that did exist. And now that I see the world through my 2 children's eyes, it's so important for me for them to have the same experiences and even better experiences than I did. And I just love the community of Williston so much. And I'm really excited to finally have the time and capacity to give back. And this is a way that I'm really excited to do that.
Great. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to turn it over to the board members for questions, but I'm actually going to ask the first one because it's actually a kind of an awkward question, and having other people ask it, and I feel guilty that I'm not the one subjecting myself to it. So a former select board member used to ask this of everybody, and the question is, if there was a conflict of interest between any other aspect of your life and your duties on the board, how would you recognize it, and what would you do about it?
Oh, that's a great question. First, I would have to take lead from what others have done in the past. First, listen to my internal self. Is this a conflict of interest? I've faced it in the past. I've served on 2 boards before, and thankfully have not had that experience. But should I feel that, I would obviously bring it to the committee, share how I was feeling, seeing if it was a deep conflict of interest, go up higher if I need to, and then make that personal choice that if it's time to step away, it's time to step away, because last thing that I would want to do is harm the integrity of myself as well as the integrity of the Parks Department.
Great. Okay. Board members, any questions?
Ted, other candidate, Susan's in the room. Do you want both candidates to answer the questions after each other, or do you want to interview them
Probably a
separately?
good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So actually, so Susan, can you come up? Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
leave it, yeah.
Don't touch it. That's
Hi,
the,
good evening.
hi. So same thing, if you could give a introduction of yourself and why you're interested in the committee.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Susan Hayes. I am very excited to be here tonight and to sort of like Carrie, I was nodding along as you were sharing, Carrie. I'm like, wow, our stories are somewhat similar in that I'm sort of at a place in my parenting journey where I have a little bit more time and space and capacity. And volunteering has always been a really important part of my life. We've lived in different communities in Vermont. My husband grew up here in Williston. We moved here, he moved around, we moved back to Williston. We lived here actually briefly from 2010 to 2013. And then we got the bright idea to try to start a small farm, which was a lovely way to live for several years. It wasn't something we could sustain over the long haul. So we moved to different parts of Vermont as we were exploring our farming journey. And in those other communities, I realized how important community service was, and it became a really important part of my life. So I was a very passionate library board trustee when we lived in Hyde Park in Lamoille County, and did some other volunteer work. And our lives brought us back to Williston during COVID, so it's good to be back. My in-laws still live here, so it's really nice to be back with family. And so I just really committed myself. Took us a couple years, especially with COVID, to get the kids settled in school. And I just feel like I have a little bit more space, and I just want to be more involved and to contribute. I just think being a part of the community is a responsibility. That's how it feels to me. And the work that I do is all virtual. I'm a consultant supporting state departments of education to implement the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to ensure that kids with disabilities are being served in public schools appropriately. And so I spend most of my life energy on Zoom in other states. And it feels really good to just like be in the room and just to be a part of the vibe of like folks who are invested in the community. And I want to do what I can in the time I do have outside of work and parenting to give back. And we're very involved in the activities of the Parks and Rec Department. So that seemed like a nice fit to contribute to something that I know a little bit about through my kids' experience primarily.
Great. So same question. If a conflict of interest arose, how would you recognize it, and what would you do about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I appreciated Carrie's. Thanks for going first, Carrie. So ditto to that. And I guess the only thing I will add, absolutely would follow all protocols. I just think transparency is paramount, and it may not be something that comes to mind immediately when you think about something of the grain size as a Parks and Rec Department, but I think anyone involved in community service, any public servant, that's integrity. I think that word Carrie used resonated with me as well, that transparency and public trust in what we do, even if it may not seem as something on the surface where there would be a conflict of interest. I think any engagement in community endeavors like this, transparency has to be paramount. So it would absolutely follow all protocols needed.
Great. Now questions from the board for either candidate.
Well, I have a question. I'll start with Susan so Carrie gets a break, okay? We live in an aging community, so not all of the rec programs are for kids. So do you have any ideas, or how would you go about approaching making sure that all of people in Williston have opportunities?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think it really is important that everything that the community supports, that everyone can see themselves in it. So when you sort of look at sort of the Parks and Recreation offerings, that there are entry points at different levels. So I think that's a really good point. And maybe there's some, I don't really know too much. I'd be interested to learn more about the work of the Parks and Rec department and team and how they go about determining the needs of the community. So I think learning more about existing need sensing activities and thinking about ways to expand those to ensure there really is a diverse portfolio, so everyone again feels like there's an entry point for how they can engage. But that'd be a great learning opportunity for someone new to the board, is what is that process of assessing the community's needs and how the Parks and Rec department can best respond, and see if there are new ways to enhance that if it feels like maybe it isn't representative enough of the community. That's a great question.
Thanks. Such a good question. We'll let Carrie try it too.
Carrie?
Susan, I think we should just tag team this. This is.
Can we do this?
I appreciate your answer. That was fantastic. And my in-laws are also local there in the Shelburne area and very avid users of the Parks and Rec department over there for some of the programming for our aging communities, we can say. I've also taken a peek at some of the offerings that you have right now, and it's really exciting to see the wish list items and that there are some really fantastic initiatives going on. So doubling down on what Susan said, learning about where the constituents are and how can we market the materials to them. I'm sure as a mom, where I'm getting information from is very different from where some of our older populations are finding information. So how can we meet our community members where they are? How can we get them the information that they need? How can we continue to raise numbers for different programming? All questions that I would ask the committee already, and then kind of use Todd and people who are in it to see how we can expand it from there.
Thank you.
Other questions?
We are at a kind of junction point here. Obviously tonight we're going to talk about the village vibrancy and the library expansion project. But a community center has long been on the town's priority list, and we did a scoping study and found that was actually very, very high up. Town pool along with that. So just wanted to see kind of, if you've thoughts on that and about how to, get the community involved, or, just, any thoughts on community engagement in that process. And I guess we'll have Carrie start this time.
Sure. It was funny. I was debating as I was thinking about this and kind of prepping. I wasn't going to say the P word of pool, because I know that is quite the hot button topic that people are buzzing about. But with Colchester just having finished their community center and pool, I know it's in the forefront of everybody's mind of how can Williston still be that #1 spot that people want to live. It's where I want to live. And so how can we continue to be up in line with our other communities that surround us in Chittenden County? This would be one area that I am very passionate about. I'm really excited about the opportunity for a community center. I'll say it for a pool. That would be wonderful. How can we build that momentum? I know it's definitely the conversation that I'm having with a lot of the younger families in Williston, that we are a part of their communities. So I know the buzz is happening. I think a really exciting challenge for this committee would be, how can we increase that buzz? How can we increase buy-in? How can we make community members ready to support that, whether financially or in just kind of a community support way? So it would be a topic that I'm definitely very excited about.
Susan?
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe, I don't know what this says. I don't have super strong feelings about that particular, I think a pool would be great. I guess I'm more interested in understanding the needs of the community and how best to meet those. So I think going maybe back to that need sensing idea, it would I think, be important, and I know efforts have been undertaken to some extent already because I've responded to surveys, and of course my neighbor would love the pool. I think conceptually what I'm attracted to in this role is not any particular activity or outcome per se, as much as being a part of a group of people that would endeavor to understand the needs of the community and figure out what's sort of realistic in terms of a response. And I think anything that fosters that sense of community. I think the Parks and Rec, and in my own children's experience in participating in events, it's that opportunity to feel like you're a part of something bigger. You're a part of a community. The school does that, certainly for families, but I think through the programming, there are, again, multiple entry points for people to feel like, yes, this is my community, these are my neighbors, I can participate in activities alongside others who are Willistonians. So whether that's a pool or a community center, I mean, that would be fantastic. Personally, I would absolutely be in support of that. But I'd be interested in looking at, again, the range of needs and sort of the current portfolio and like what could help continue to enhance that sense of connectedness and community. And if that's a community center and a pool, like I'm all for it. But I'm interested in just better understanding sort of the fabric of the Williston community and what people would identify as needs and priorities. And just recognizing, especially now, there's concerns about the cost of living here and just, wanting to kind of dig into that nuance of people's needs, priorities, goals, and what the community can realistically support.
Thank you.
Other questions? No?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say I think we have two well-qualified candidates that apply and do both.
It's a great problem to have. I was like, I love this. Go Williston. There are multiple people who want to serve in this role. It's a good sign.
And I would encourage you, unfortunately, we do only have the one opening, but there are, in looking at the volunteer opportunities right now, Cemetery Commission, Conservation Commission, DRB, Energy, Historic and Design Advisory Committee, Housing Committee. So please, if whoever, you're both so very qualified, it would be such great additions, but please consider, serving on one of our other committees or commissions. And to anyone else out there listening, please.
Public health officer.
And the public health officer. We have a really good one, but I think we would give up the role.
Okay, so thank you. When we have a situation where we have more than one person applying, we actually take it up later in the meeting. So we're going to go on to other items, but we are expected to have a vote on this tonight at some point. So
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, Village Vibrancy Project, the library and town.
You forgot
Oh.
Terry, didn't you?
Oh, hi.
Forgot him so soon.
How quickly? I'm really sorry, Terry. Come on up. Hey, wow, that's embarrassing. Come on up.
Well, thank you for the invitation to come and interview. My first thought when Eric sent me the date for the meeting was I was going to appear tonight and say, thank you for the opportunity, but April Fool's. But actually, I'm very serious about applying for the position of lister. It's been a vacancy for some time now. There was nobody who ran for the position at the general election in March. And it's one of those positions that you don't see too much of this publicly, but in a person who is on the board has a great deal of responsibility. We are fortunate in the town that we have an assistant assessor and an official assessor, both who are very capable people to do the jobs that are done. The lister's job, my understanding from a conversation from both Michaela and Bill Hinman, the major task that the listers have is to approve the grand list. And listening when I was a select board member, we would get great detail information from Bill Hinman about the grand list, and sometimes it was good news, sometimes it was bad news. And so we're very fortunate to have that. My background, I was on the CCRPC, and I have some financial expertise from various places. I'm the co-treasurer of the Historical Society here in Williston. I'm also the treasurer for the Association of Food and Drug Officials Endowment Foundation. It's a national organization. In ancient history, I was a House Corporation treasurer for a fraternity at UVM for 30 years and served on the State Employees Retirement Board for 20 years and was chair of that for 10 years. So I think what I bring to you is sitting on the Board of Civil Authority, both as a Justice of the Peace and a member of the Select Board over a number of years, and participated in a number of appeals also, and sat on some of the investigatory committees that were necessary to take a look at the appeals of both individuals and industry. I think that's all I can tell you at this point, except if I can supersede you and talk about a conflict of interest. Certainly, there's a great opportunity to have a conflict of interest as a lister, because you have neighbors who may come in to appeal. Actually, you might have a relative who comes in to appeal, or friends who are good friends of yours. And actually, thinking about it, maybe people who you don't get along too well that might have a bone to pick with you as a lister in making a decision. So I would certainly recuse myself in those instances where, and also industry, commercial properties as well, where I might have an interest, although I don't think I do, for anything in town. So that's all I have at this moment.
Well, you stole my question. Does anybody have any questions from the board?
Stole my question, too. Well, why should we pick you?
I'll just share mechanically with, per the town charter, if there's a vacancy in elected position, in this instance, a elected lister's position, that position can be filled by majority vote of the select board through appointment that would carry until the next town meeting. So sort of folks are saying, hey, it's in this elected position, this is within the select board's authority to appoint someone.
Okay. All right.
Ellie, do you have any questions? I apologize that, yeah.
It's okay, I think you answered them already.
Okay.
Okay. So, yep, I'm glad that we get to appoint this. I remember when we used to appoint the fence viewers and weighers of coal and all that stuff, and the legislature foolishly got rid of those important
Yes.
offices.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah.
Objection. I'm going to move to appoint Terry McKeag to the position of lister to fill an unexpired term until town meeting 2026.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ellie, I'm going to assume you said aye?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and there are no nays, so the ayes have it, and congratulations.
Welcome back, Terry.
Okay, so now we move on to Village Vibrancy Project, Library in Town Green. I know that we have a presentation from Maeve.
Yep, she's here. And I can just kind of reset.
Yeah, well, come on up and get warmed up.
Okay.
I can kind of reset the conversation for the board and the public. So this is going to continue the discussion on the Village Vibrancy Project. As the chair stated, Maeve McBride's joining us from CPG Associates this evening. This is the consulting firm the town's working with on a capital campaign feasibility study this spring for the project. Overall, staff is seeking direction from the select board on the overall project scope to test for the study this spring. CPG has extensive experience advising on library capital campaigns in Vermont. And I'll pull up some slides that Maeve will walk through, and then open for discussion with the select board. And a number of trustees are here this evening as well from the library, and our interim director, Bonnie, and our architect, John. So
Great.
I will pull up your slides, Maeve.
Sounds good.
So let's go.
welcome.
Great, yes, welcome. Thanks for inviting me. And happy to keep it fairly informal too. So as I go through these slides, it's really just a placeholder. So I remember to say all of the things, but if you have questions as I go along, please feel free to interrupt. And are you able to put those up there?
It should pop up
Great.
there.
And I apologize, Eric. I think I did put like all the animation on these, so you can have to click
It'll be
through.
fun and exciting.
And I'll apologize too. Being a former scientist, there's nothing terribly exciting here, just words. So sorry for that. But yeah, I thought you were curious about a feasibility study, how it works, what we're looking for, and that sort of thing. So I thought I'd run through that with you. Great. To start, just what is that, to be clear? So I wanted to be clear that obviously Williston has done a lot of work already to demonstrate the need for a project, for the library project. What we're doing is just to test if there is philanthropic support for the project. We focus on high-level capacity, people with high capacity, because a campaign is really reliant on those sorts of folks to raise what we've been potentially talking about, around a $3.5 million. How we do this is we talk to about 25 different people in the community, potentially donors already to the library or prospective donors to the library. Those are confidential interviews, and then we put those together and create a report for the library and for you all, synthesizing that information, which then gives you an idea of what kind of support there is out there. And it's the last bullet is really about how a feasibility study is not just about taking the temperature for support, but it's also a way for the library staff and library volunteers to develop stronger relationships with donors. And in working with libraries before, this is actually a really important aspect of any capital campaign that a library would run, because libraries are often, for the most part, publicly funded. And so unlike other organizations that often have to rely on philanthropic support, libraries often don't. And so sometimes those relationships with philanthropists in the community might not be as strong. And so the feasibility study really helps to start to build stronger relationships there. Yeah, you just go through those. So to be clear, a study is not, we're not asking for funds at this point. It's really more of a hypothetical to put in front of prospective donors. It's a test of general community support. It's giving also people a little bit of a preview about what the project would be. And it also can help you recruit members to be volunteers for the campaign. Great. Yeah, just a note about that isn't the, recruiting of volunteers isn't the main priority, but sometimes that happens serendipitously during a campaign, during a study. So what you'll learn, basically the key things are learning about what is the messaging that people resonate with best, and then that helps to develop your capital campaign materials from that point on. It also sometimes, I know there's been a question about kind of a bit of the scale and the scope of the project here with the town green component. It is possible to ask that question in the study as part of our questioning, but you don't want to have too much flexibility in the plans, because sometimes the conversation then can go in that direction of having too many alternatives. But if there's kind of one component that is being considered, we can ask about that in the study, and then that can provide you some insight. I know that was brought up before in a previous meeting. So, what else can I say about this? Oh, it's another way also to often people we interview might be connected with other sources of funding that could be helpful for the project. Great. Great. You can probably go to the next slide. Yep. And then after the interviews, it's standard that we want to have the library staff stay in contact with these folks, and so they would each review, or would receive kind of we usually prepare an executive summary of the study that is shared with those folks that participated. We prepare a fairly lengthy report that integrates not just the results of the interviews, but part of our process is also an internal assessment that we've already done with, when Jane was still around, and with Bonnie, about getting the library really prepared to run a campaign if that decision is made to do that. How best to do that, what are the systems and policies kind of needed to support that. And yeah, I think that's about it for after the interviews. And then that will come to you too, of course. So, now is really or I guess this is talking about next steps once the report is prepared. So once you have that at hand, it really becomes a decision point about whether to proceed with a campaign or to proceed with a campaign of a certain size, and so that's kind of a next step after the feasibility study is done. Often a campaign, certainly of a scale of many millions of dollars, would benefit from having some support, some consultation, especially for groups and organizations that don't typically do a lot of fundraising. And then the campaign, just a little preview, a capital campaign, if you haven't been on the back end of one, typically proceeds from kind of a more quiet and silent phase when solicitations are happening with those highest possible donors, lead gifts, that sort of thing, and then later on it enters into a more public phase where smaller gifts and everyone in the community is encouraged to participate. So that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Question from the board?
So I'm struggling with the timing of the campaign versus a bond.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that at all?
Yes, for sure. So, typically, I would say a powerful message to bring to potential donors, lead donors, is to say, we really need a library in the community, and we will be more likely to pass a bond if we have charitable support. And so I think as far as timing goes, and what we've seen work in other projects, with other library projects, is to time the campaign, the study, the campaign, and then the bond vote such that you have ideally secured some of those top and lead gifts in pledge form, right? So, and a reminder too that in a capital campaign, a pledged gift is a legally binding gift. And so I think a good course of a timeline would be to be able to secure some of those pledges so that then when the bond is brought before the public, you can say, yes, the project is X amount of dollars, but we only anticipate that we actually have to bond for this much because we have already fundraised, X amount of dollars, and we are still continuing to fundraise and have a goal of such and such. And also to, I think, bring into that any other funding sources that might be available, whether there was
Grants or something?
Yeah, grants or local options tax or things like that, Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So is there time to do that and still have a November vote? That sounds, you have a study and pledges before we got to a vote. That seemed very short.
So at least for this study, you can say that we, our hope was to have the report, because I think it's really important that the new library director is involved in the study and is, communicating with people around that. So we were looking at starting that up as quickly as we can, and then running interviews probably in mid-May, which then we could have a report, depending on availability with all the interviewees, have a report ready maybe by mid-June. And then there's usually a need for about a month for, the decision has to be made about whether or not to do the capital campaign. And if the decision is made to go forward, at that point, there's usually a little bit of planning time to create the brochure and create the materials. Typically about a month is what we recommend, kind of thinking about for a timeline for that. And then, and then those early gifts are, early solicitations, early pledges. And, that doesn't necessarily have to be all that many. Typically what we will do, one of the results of the feasibility study will be to provide a donor pyramid with what we think might be a way to reach your goal in terms of what level of gifts, how many people might be able to give those, right? And so those early solicitations might only be 5 to 7 people or interviews, in meetings. And so that could happen fairly quickly. So I guess mid-June, maybe mid-July. Summer can be a hard time to start to reach people, but I think that could line up, for November, I would think. Yeah.
Other questions?
I know you mentioned something about, no solicitation. Does that mean this would only be strictly private contributions?
Oh, what I meant by that is these early conversations that we're having are really just, think of it as like hypothetical. So, we have this project of the library, and we're asking people just, if this project were to go forward and if the library was to do a capital campaign, how would you support that? Would you be interested in supporting that? So really, it's just kind of a first kind of testing to see if the support's there, and then the actual ask for a gift or for a pledge for a gift would come later, late summer, I think is what I was just talking about, or fall. Should the town go forward with that? Should the library go forward with the capital campaign?
Which
that
point
makes
there would
sense.
definitely be solicitations. That's the ask.
So it'd be private and commercial. So it's, probably people, you'd be going through first, contributions.
Well, we don't do the solicitation phase. That's done by most likely the library director, library staff, or trustees as well. Mm-hmm.
How does another organization such as a college, university, solicitate or whatever, get donations, for a library? They do a similar process?
Well, you mean kind of like, say, UVM or something?
Library, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, universities and colleges often have very robust development departments and there's the UVM Foundation that have many staff working on development for all sorts of things across campus. I think what, public libraries are, again, like I said, not typically doing fundraising on on a regular basis. And so that's where hopefully we can be supportive and support staff to do that and do that well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just to test, did you want to say something?
Oh, no.
Gotcha. Just to test my, my understanding. So hypothetically, the study goes out, we say, really we're trying to we'd like to test the theory of raising $3 million for this $13 million library. We think that would be something that would get this over the line. The town really needs it. Your study comes back and says, you're dreaming, but maybe $1 million, $1.5 million comfortably you could count, you can't count on it, it's not here yet, but yes. And so the select board says, okay, let's go do that. You're working on pledges. At some point in the fall, the select board says, well, we have this $13.5 million project we want to move forward with. We have 500 or 600 in pledges, maybe we can get to $1 million, but we go ahead and we bond for the whole 13.5, but we're able to tell the community, we already have pledges, we're still aiming for 1.5. Is that how it works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's the approach Middle Mary's doing. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. And I'll say too, sometimes some communities have had to do multiple tries at a bond vote too for the library, and that would give you more time to fundraise potentially too from other outside sources. Yeah.
And that was going to be my other point. If somebody has given you a pledge and then the bond goes down and we have to change the plan, does that nullify the pledge? Do you have to go back because it could be a different project?
So, yeah, typically we'd want to try and make those pledges as, unrestricted as possible, right?
Yeah.
And certainly it's always, it's in many ways up to the donor and up to what the pledge actually says. But I think, if there were concerns about, and that, those concerns might come up in the interviews too, right? In terms of, how bonds have fared in this town and whether people have any concern about, the outcome of a bond vote on this project. That's something we could talk about in there if we felt that was really important to say, well, the town's intention is that this project really is needed, so even if the bond doesn't pass in November, that more work would be done, more fundraising, slight change in the project, whatever that might be, to then potentially consider, putting it up for another bond, either for a special vote or maybe town meeting day or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, just thinking the legal components, if the board were to have a special town meeting, still the warning would need to be posted 30 to 40 days prior to that meeting. Certainly a project like this, the board want to consider enough time for public outreach and education leading up to that vote. Legally working with bond counsel, we keep them apprised, and it's drawing up the warning and the necessity resolution and those documents, but your bond counsel had time for that. So the board does consider this isn't a decision for tonight, but as you're thinking about possible scenarios, if you're considering a November scenario of this year, probably your decision point is by August, early September, just to make sure we have time to get all the legal documents drawn up and for public outreach. Legally, the warning would need to be signed and posted, 30 days, first week in October. Can always 30 to 40 days, but it can start being communicated earlier if that's the intent of the board. So just be thinking about that, those timing mechanisms on the legal side.
And then probably a question for Eric is, if the $13 million bond, for example, is approved and, we find that we raise $1 or $2 million, how does that money get, allocated? How does the money?
Sure. Yeah, with selling public bonds, the first step is getting the approval from the voters to then go out and sell those bonds on the bond market. So, the first step is getting that approval. Then the next step is actually selling the bonds. So we usually work with the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to pool our public debt with other public debt projects around the state, and they package it and sell it on the bond market. They do two pools with that, usually a winter pool and a summer pool. We'd likely be looking at the summer pool of 26 if this timeline we're hypothetically talking about played out. So if we have the authority to bond for, say, $13.5 million, but we're able to raise $3 million before we have to actually go to the bond sale, then we only need to sell $10 million worth of bonds, and that, you're paying back that debt service over the life of the bonds.
So that's money that we're not borrowing.
Correct.
Carla, I saw you raised your hand.
Oh, should I sit there?
Wherever you want.
Yeah, that'd be great. You can be Ellie. You can be Ellie if you want. She won't mind. So I'm one of the trustees, and I guess I know you've got a lot of experience raising money successfully for other library campaigns, and but those are other libraries, and this library is very personal and very unique. And so I'm just curious about, like, what would be like the 4 highlights that you would be talking to these, the people in these initial interviews about why our library in particular would be something that they would want to donate money for?
Mm-hmm. So with all of the campaigns that we run and feasibility studies, we have the client prepare what we call the case statement, which is a 2-page concise document that describes the project and what the funds would go to. And so actually Bonnie's been writing a beautiful piece that is that and tells your unique story and tells why the Williston Library is so important, right? And so that's a key piece of material that goes to all of the interviewees. And then we discuss it. We talk about the library, we talk about the project, we talk about their possible giving in the course of the interview. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Another element of the case statement too is the visual component of the scope of the project, and kind of hence figuring out what scope we're going to test to make sure that's part of the materials.
Any other questions or comments from the people in the room, or for that matter, people on the board? Shape, come on up.
I can use this mic.
Sure.
First of all, I'm here partly because I misinterpreted the agenda item and I read the green part really loud. Fundraising for the green, and the green work, I'm sure, is dwarfed by the library fundraising. But the issue that I want to raise, I would like to say at this level of information for the town, and may affect the fundraising if it goes forward, because it's about an issue that might either generate more funds or might be an issue that would want to be funded separately. So if I may, it'd take me 1.5 minutes to read you what I have to say.
Did you test that before you?
I did. Actually, it was 1 minute and 32 seconds.
Okay.
I'm going to go 2 seconds faster.
Yeah, please do.
So, kwai to all of you here. Williston was inhabited by native people for more than 10,000 years prior to European settlers taking this land in the late 1600s. On the town green, we have a statue of Thomas Chittenden, and there's a plaque of the Marquis de Lafayette, which has already been created and is pending installation. We lack an installation acknowledging the thousands of years that native people lived here. Williston should incorporate some sort of installation about and by the Abenaki on the town green and include interpretive signage to go with it. The installation could take many forms. It could be a statue like the Chief Greylock statue at Battery Park in Burlington. It could be a totem pole, as in many locations. It could be a story worked along or into the path, or even a large mandala embedded in the round paved gathering area where the town band will perform. But we should be planning for something in the scope of the Village Green project. And as an aside, it might be something that donations could be slotted for separately. I made this suggestion to members of the Library Design Committee, Carla and John, who are here, several months ago, and they were receptive to the idea. I don't see it in the most recent drawings, however, so I wanted to bring it to your attention as an important component of the vibrant green we are trying to create, for which costs must be budgeted. As you may know, there's a complication in doing an Abenaki installation at this time because the Odanak of Quebec dispute the legitimacy of the Vermont state-recognized Abenaki tribes. We are in the lands of the state-recognized Missisquoi tribe and need to find a way to engage with that nation for such an installation. Grants may be one source of funding, but we should be committed to the cost regardless. Thanks, Uli Uni.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any other questions or comments
When Chapin said green, I do have to bring up the fact that I have people outreach to me to say that we should not have a gas fireplace
Yep.
because of our energy. It should be electric, so I just needed to get that in because I told them I would.
We did. I heard from several folks as well, and actually, that was one of the things that, I mean, that's aside from my capital campaign feasibility study, but the possibility of just changing that one design aesthetic to an electric, but.
Ms. Chapin said green, that was, otherwise I wasn't
Yes.
gonna bring it up, so I had to play on the green thing.
Maybe not a call to Vermont Gas Systems.
I thought wood was green.
Okay, any other questions or concerns people want to raise before we move on?
Eric, are we okay with scope? I keep coming up and I still don't know how to answer the question, so.
Yeah, so, I'm hearing from the board, supportive of the project, and certainly the cost is gonna be a driving factor here. As a next step, we need to launch this feasibility study. What we could do is test the scope as transmitted to you by the library trustees. We could gain some more information there, and it sounds like it may be pertinent to have a question about the town green component itself, as you spoke to Maeve as part of that feasibility study. Then that can give the board, that information, early summer, and then really be plotting out what's the next step for this project and what's that trajectory. If that's the direction that the board would like to go in, then can direct a consultant to go that course and get really working on the feasibility study in the next few weeks. I see nods, so is that, I'm assuming, that's a yes from the board.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
think it makes sense to do the study based on the current scope.
And I think it's easy enough to change the fireplace to electric.
I think it's done already.
It was already electric, it just looked like a gas.
Yeah.
So, okay, so is that the consensus of the board then?
Yes.
Okay.
Ellie?
Ellie?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great, nice to meet you.
Can I say one
Oh,
thing
yeah,
about the
please do.
fireplace?
John?
It wasn't so much that it was gas or electric, it was that it was not wood. We were
Yes.
not suggesting a
Well, I
open
very
wood
much appreciate
fire
that.
place in the library.
It can
So I
also
think
not
beyond
be-
that, I
Yes.
think it's very flexible,
Yes.
but
Okay.
we're not gonna do wood.
No.
All right. Thank you. So that does bring us up to the next item on our agenda, which is the public hearing for the zoning bylaw amendment.
Big fish.
Multiply. Have that.
Scoot over so I can
See jeans and a sweater earlier, but I dressed up because we have a public hearing.
Welcome back, Emily.
Thanks, Mike. Good to see you all.
So to officially convene the meeting, we do have to read the public notice, so let me do that. We're convening the public hearing at 7:54 PM. The Williston Selectboard will hold a public hearing to consider amendments to the Williston Unified Development Bylaw. These amendments address residential density, parking, and loading requirements and compliance with the new provisions of 24 VSA Sections 4412, 4413, and 4414, enacted under Act 81, the Be Home Act, in 2024. The proposed changes also include updates to the village zoning district and applicable design standards in other chapters of the bylaw. The public hearing will take place on Tuesday, April 1 at 7:45. We're close enough. In the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room at the Williston Town Hall, located at 7900 Williston Road, Williston, Vermont, and remote participation is available at in the Zoom link that was part of the public hearing. So with that, the hearing is opened, and Emily, do you have a brief presentation? Eric, do you want to lead in, or?
No, it's typically, to open these public hearings, staff will provide an overview for the public and then open for public comment. So Senior Planner Emily Hayman's here to provide that overview.
Thanks, everybody. So I won't do as big and detailed as a presentation as I did at the informational session.
The core of this zoning bylaw amendment is the change to the village zoning district. So strengthening and clarifying the design and development standards for this beloved heart of Williston, to preserve historic structures, but also allow flexibility for them, for additions, for new accessory buildings, for new developments in the village that are in the scale and character with the historic pattern of connected farm buildings, historic homes that serve multiple uses over time. And then the second set of amendments is in compliance with Act 181, the Be Home Act, and clarifying some of our provisions around parking, dwelling units, et cetera, in the village zoning district. These two hearings went through 2 hearing packages with the Planning Commission just to help keep our head straight, but they are merged together into this one public hearing. If you guys have particular questions about the provisions, I can answer questions. Thank you. Oh, wait, I did forget to add, so we did have those 2 pre-hearing informational sessions. No members of the public attended. Chapin Kaner from the Planning Commission did come to one. I'm glad we offered them. We had one on a Monday evening and one on a Thursday lunch hour to try to provide different opportunities and times for people to engage. Most of my village zoning district correspondence was prior to that Planning Commission public hearing, when I corresponded with everybody who participated in the village bylaw process back in 2022, a lot of direct outreach to property owners. So most of that engagement was prior to the select board hearing process with the public.
I think it's the planning committee.
Like, there's either a lot of people who are suddenly very interested, or the planning commission's here.
Yes, both and.
Now, I know that there was quite a bit of outreach on the village changes, and we had a pretty thorough discussion about this just recently, so I don't have any new questions or concerns.
Anybody online?
No one online.
Any questions or concerns from the general public in the room? Imagining maybe not, but, okay, and Eric, you said there's nobody online?
No one online to.
All right, okay. So if there is no more content that we'd be asking Emily to provide, and if there are no questions or comments, I think a motion to close the public hearing would be in order.
I move to close the public hearing on proposed amendments to the Williston Unified Development Bylaw.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 There are no nays. The ayes have it. The public hearing is closed. Next on the agenda then would be the zoning bylaw amendments and the considering adopting them. So,
I move to adopt changes to the Williston Unified Development Bylaw as proposed.
is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Members of the Planning Commission, you came over for the meeting. Did you want to say anything, or you just, because we're going to vote and it's going to be over?
They're for, either here
The
for
town
8.
plan too.
Okay, all right, no, yeah,
They got a few things.
sure.
Sure, you got to come up though so they can hear you.
This was a huge amount of work from staff.
Yeah.
And a really, really professional, awesome job. So I just want to extend the Planning Commission's appreciation, because it's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a motion having been made and seconded, all those in favor say aye.
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 There are no nays. The ayes have it. The zoning bylaws amendment is adopted.
I'll echo Shayla's words on behalf of the Planning Commission. Great work by our planning department, and to Emily, it's about 3 years for the village bylaw project. So thanks for all the great work.
So that does bring us up to the town plan strategies and objectives. So,
Is Matt taking the lead on this?
okay. Well,
So I can just kind of set the table here.
Yeah.
So the select board and the public are receiving an updated rubric of the outline of the town plan draft this evening. A number of edits have been made from comments submitted by the select board, planning commission, town staff, and to get this revised document, the before you. The planning staff and the commission will walk through these at a high level and talk about a potential timeline moving ahead for the adoption process for the town plan in the spring and summer.
Okay.
And I wait for staff to take the lead on the rest.
Is there any quick item in the manager's report that we could?
Yeah, I can, I didn't have a whole lot. I can just update our town hall parking lot project. It's out to bid. We're going to open bids next week on that and get an idea of the cost and the timeline. Hopefully it's within what we budgeted. Our TIF district feasibility study is continuing. Our wastewater engineer, they should be wrapping up their work in the coming weeks. And then our TIF study, we're hoping for a spring, early summer. Update on the wastewater analysis when we do the enterprise fund budgets, probably in late May, early June. And working to finish up the TIF district feasibility study, probably early summer. We'll have a better sense once we have those wastewater project numbers. The fire department community-based strategic plan, that took place last week. We had the consultant here for 3 days. We had a community engagement piece of that, and then our fire staff worked for 3 days with the consultant. So that's being put together in draft form. So that'll be being worked on the next couple of months to wrap that up.
Wow, we didn't have any fires for 3 days, so they could do that.
No, we had, certainly had coverage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we were able to have a lot of members of the department participate and make sure we had coverage for that, so it's good. And then just an update on our local option tax bill, H397 we're watching. It's part of the flood relief bill. As a reminder, this is the ratio for local option taxes. It's currently split 70-30 between the state and the municipality. This bill at one point changed it to 80-20. The most current version after it went through House GovOps is 75-25. It's going to go to the Senate here this coming week, or this week. I'll keep the board updated as that ratio will change, but it does seem to have good support. It's attached to the flood relief bill. Hopefully there'll be some change adopted this session by the legislature and the governor. So things will start to really pick up the pace over the next month in Montpelier. So we'll see where that lands.
Do you know if they came off the 80-20 for financial reasons, like they couldn't afford the payment in lieu, or because they want to use the money somewhere else? Is there anything we can do to advocate to get it back to 80-20?
Yeah, VLCT is continuing to do that on members' behalf. I'll check in with their advocacy staff. I thought they would call for some testimony from municipalities. I don't think that's really occurred yet. I think it's a good voice for the legislature to hear. I understand with that shift from the 25-75, testimony wasn't taken about the towns that just adopted a local option sales tax this past town meeting day. So part of this is growing that pilot fund surplus, and now it's going to be projected to increase that surplus with additional local option tax levies out there. So all, I think, good points to make in let's change the distribution formula because the state is getting more than it needs for the pilot fund to then send back for payment in lieu of taxes.
No, I was just curious. They say, well, it's now going to fund the payment in lieu. It's also going to fund an emergency, something else that, or is it just they're uncomfortable with the numbers? So.
I know the flood relief component was, I believe, $1 million from that surplus,
right,
and not the new year-to-year funds. Yeah. I'll certainly continue to add our voice to that conversation for the greatest change in ratio as possible.
Thanks.
Eric, you mentioned the parking lot. Have they changed the flow of the traffic in the parking lot out here?
In the design?
Or, just like last week and this week, there's a sawhorse across the parking lot.
We've got some other signs that we need to do some work out there. We've got it's a kind of a quasi sinkhole and some other shifting with heaving out there. So that's just put for safety right now. We've had a few of those holes open up over the last month or so. So definitely good we're doing the project this year.
I don't want to fall into one of those holes.
Exactly.
No. The only other thing I have is I anticipate at the April 15th meeting executive session, see if the board's available for a 6:30 start for that meeting.
Does that sound good to everybody right now? Okay, if there's an issue with that, email Eric. Okay.
That's all I have.
All right, great. We've been waiting for your wisdom.
Well, you have my presence at least. Thanks for having us over here tonight. You've seen a lot of the planning staff tonight and now myself and the Planning Commission. We're back to you tonight with an update on the process of developing the 2025 comprehensive plan. Eric, if you could make it so I can share screen, I'll probably just share a few of the documents, just the ones that were shown to the select board in your packet.
Check the other thing.
Great.
Yeah, that should work now, I think.
Okay. All right. So what you all received from us was a pretty lengthy document. Apologies for that. It included a memo going over the state of the current draft, the ways in which we've edited the objectives, strategies, and actions in the town plan related to all of your comments from town staff and department heads, comments from other committee members. We had over 400 comments made on the objective, strategies, and actions, and in our working through them, we made over 600 edits to that document since the last time you've seen it. And I do have a red line version if anybody wants to see what that looks like, but it's extensive. And I can share. That for just a second. Sorry, I'm coming out of my last Zoom meeting that I was hosting and doing this at the same time. There it is. And can certainly make this document available for anybody who wants to look at it. But what you'll see is the red line strikeout throughout all of the strategies and actions, as well as all of the comments we received, and generally a comment from staff following any comment where we made an edit saying, I made an edit to this, I tried to capture what the comment was saying. So a couple things about strategies and actions that are different from what you all saw before. First, really globally, we narrowed down the number of verbs that we're using in the action items. And all of the action items now start with one of these words. Evaluate, develop, implement, maintain, support, fund, or prioritize, and we never use consider. We got rid of all of those. And in each case, this section of your memo, you'll see that we've prepared a definition. What does it mean we're going to do when we say we're going to do one of these things? What's the work product that you can have in your hand and say, okay, I can check that action off, I did it. So for example, evaluate means we're assembling more information about something. We're trying to understand something better. We're trying to decide whether to take some next steps. So there might be a research piece, a white paper prepared by staff, a public survey, and then presentation of that information to a decision-making body, and a decision of whether to take another step or not. That's what evaluate means. And it's probably the most heavily used verb in the action table. And in general, where we saw comments on the strategies and actions that said, I'm not so sure we're ready for this one, I think we should dial this back, do we know enough about this? All of those were taken back to that evaluate level. And evaluate kind of sits in a hierarchy where the next step would be develop, and the step after that would be implement. And later on, you might even get all the way down to a step that looks like fund. And that's another definition I just wanted to cover, is when the plan says fund something, we know the comprehensive plan can't make a budgeting decision. So what does fund mean? It really means decide if you're going to fund or not. It means this is something that costs money. We acknowledge that it costs money. We can check it off the list once we've gotten it in front of the decision-making body. Usually the select board is part of the operating or capital budget, maybe the voters in the case of a bond, and there's been a decision made. That's what fund means in the context of the comprehensive plan. So I think having these definitions adds a lot of insight to the actions table, and it also just builds some understanding of what can a comprehensive plan do and what can it not do. So that's something to be thinking about as you're reviewing these revised strategies and actions.
Hey, Matt, I was going to say, just to stop you, I think that this was really helpful and took some of my panic off of some of the actions. Fund and prioritize. Well, first of all, I'm not expecting an answer. I'm just trying to articulate badly. What I'm trying to say is that I did see a lot of them were upgraded to evaluate, which did feel wishy-washy to me a little bit on some things, but on the other hand, so for me, evaluate would be appropriate when we haven't had a discussion about it at all, kind of. Fund, if we're going to vote and accept this as the town plan and it says fund, it feels to me like the select board has decided if we can get funding for it, we're doing it, which is a little harder than some of the things I'm ready to say. So I really appreciate this. I think it's a great step. I just have to sort of read through it again with the action verbs on there to see if where I am at is aligned with these. But overall, I think having these definitions is a huge step forward. It makes it much clearer.
And to be clear, these are up for discussion and edit too. I wrote these in a day, trying to put some boundaries around things, and
Yeah.
they are by no means perfect. So if there are ways to describe these actions that help, and then choosing the right level, or if there's another verb we ought to add in there that captures something better. I think of evaluate kind of like a super consider, in that there's a written record of what you did. We put some information together, we identified what next steps would be, we decided if we wanted to learn more, we decided if we wanted to move on with something. Whereas consider, you can really just look and say, well, yeah, we thought about that. Sure we did. Check it off. So that's the goal there. Thank you. I'm going to move over just to your overall cover memo and use that to talk through a couple of things about where we are in the process and some other things we identified in this review of the plan. Hopefully that's sort of legible, but I'll highlight the important parts. So I talked about how we revised all the goals, strategies, and actions, and how we defined the action words. We added a couple of other things in here. We're still reminding everybody of the plan structure. You've seen some of this before. This is essentially a standing memo that we're going to keep updating every time we're back in front of the Planning Commission, every time we're back in front of the Select Board, so that you all can see the status of this project. Because as I told the Planning Commission earlier tonight, the best thing I can say about our project schedule right now is that it does bring us into the point where the plan can be adopted ahead of the August 25th expiration of the current plan. That's the very best thing about it. The worst thing about it is we've got a lot of work to do in the next couple of weeks to get the draft into shape where you can take it to hearing. So I did want to mention a couple of other things. There's this table of top 20 priority actions. These were identified by the Planning Commission. They still need a little bit of adjustment. And the reason there's 40 of them right now and not 20 is because you see them both with the revised action verbs and from before. So it's the same ones twice, just different verbs, just to show the evolution there. Those are in there, and that's something to think about as Select Board members. Are there ones there that you wouldn't have in the top 20? Are there ones that are not there that you might want to have in the top 20? You'll be seeing that prioritization play out in the table again later. So in that chapter 0, how to use this plan, where the action verbs are defined, there's also a set of symbols that we're going to be adding to these priority table or to these action tables to show ones that are either a priority or that meet goals in multiple subject areas, et cetera. We want to highlight things that way. We did also receive some comments that were more targeted at the overall plan, and I just picked 2 of them to identify, mostly to let the Planning Commission know there's, some differences in direction between the way the plan's drafted and some of the comments we were getting. So one was, this really kind of sticky thing about, given that we have a lower wage workforce in town, what is the town's reaction to that, responsibility to that workforce around issues of housing? What's the comfort level with that? The second one was about a statement in the plan about growth management versus school population. And really, I show this one not even just because of this one particular issue, but because there were a bunch of comments about the school and the town. And so this is really our first full town plan since those two entities have been as separated as they are today. And they're really separate governments, almost separate municipalities at this point. And the required plan element in Vermont law about having a plan for education was written when towns ran schools. And it meant something really different than it means today. But we're writing a plan for the same group of people whose kids go to the public schools in Williston, whose kids access childcare in Williston. We're writing a plan that covers the same geographic area. And we're writing a plan that acknowledges that we do share a lot of facilities between the two of us. I mean, when I need a bigger meeting room and I can't get this one, I might call the school. We're gonna have town meeting, we go have it at the school. And we like having that partnership and coordination, but the role might be a little different when we're not thinking of ourselves as the operator of that system anymore. And so how many other policy levers do you want to pull to try to impact what the school system might be experiencing, which is really what the idea of concurrency of services with growth management was about. And how does that look today, given we have a growth in number of homes, but a flat population, and we have a shrinking household size, and we have fewer and fewer kids per household? Where does that relationship land as far as the comp plan is concerned? We want to know a lot about what's going on in the schools, but we're not really directing them to do anything in particular. So that's something I wanted to mostly show it to you all, to tell you that I'm showing that to the Planning Commission as we work through our draft and the way the language plays out in the chapters. Like I said, the best thing about this plan timeline is that it takes us to adoption before the expiration of the current plan, and the worst thing is it's a whole ton of work compressed into a pretty short time frame. So I just wanted to mention, here we are, April 1, and we're showing you this really big revision to the strategies and actions. Also got an example full chapter to show you where we're going with the 17 chapters. And we're driving toward a review meeting in 2 weeks from tonight with the Planning Commission, where we're asking the Planning Commission to be ready to tell us to warn a public hearing for May 20th. Because to warn that hearing, we need to tell our neighboring communities that we've got a plan 30 days ahead of May 20th. So a lot of writing for us to do at the staff level, and there will be an evolution of what you're seeing tonight, because what the Planning Commission votes to warn for a hearing, they're immediately going to hold that hearing and think about other things they want to change. And they're going to direct us to make those changes and hopefully then transmit to you. We want to show you that hearing draft on May 6th. And we want to ask you on May 6th if you're ready to schedule an informational meeting in anticipation of a May 20th transmittal by the Planning Commission. So tentatively, you'd be able to hold your informational meeting on this plan on June 3rd. And if you're ready to warn a public hearing, that would let us warn public hearings for July 15th and August 19th, which match your schedule by law. A community over 2,500 people does have to hold 2 public hearings. And that would allow you, if you choose to, on August 19th, vote for adoption a mere 6 days before the expiration of the current plan. The consequences of letting the plan expire are relatively minimal, especially if it's for a short amount of time. I don't mean to give you this schedule to pressure the board into making a fast decision on an 8-year-long comp plan. But a lot of why we're here in front of you over and over again is to try to build a lot of evolution of this plan into the process and a lot of familiarity with what it says and what it does, so that we can get through adoption relatively efficiently. Below that schedule, we're fleshing out some public outreach. Planners in Williston love 5 Tuesday months, because it normally means we have a Tuesday night off, but we're actually going to use that Tuesday to do a public information session over at the library, just sort of a, hey, community, come one, come all, let's talk about the draft town plan. Quorum of the Planning Commission might be in attendance that night, but it's not a formal Planning Commission meeting. And then we're also reaching out to other community groups. We're planning to present at an upcoming senior lunch at the rec zone. We're going to talk to the library trustees. We've sent an inquiry to the Rotary Club to appear as a speaker there, which would be nice, because I spoke on this a year and a half ago when we were just getting started. We are going to be tabling at Green Up Day under the tent with the town plan as our main department subject matter, and we are looking for other community groups that have regular meetings that might be interested in hosting us. We'll bring a road show to them and talk over this with people. We really want the community to be well informed of what we're doing, and of course this is all being updated on the website as we go, and we're using our newsletter and Front Porch Forum, et cetera, to publicize that. So that's what I've got tonight. Here's this big update. Here's everything we've worked through. Here's what it's going to start to look like, and I'll just quickly share that example chapter 1 so you can see something that looks a little nicer. And then we have Planning Commission members here tonight to maybe answer any questions you might have, or to, if they want to, talk about their perspective on developing the plan thus far. There's some familiar faces here in chapter 1. But here's just what that structure is going to look like, and then I'll leave it to any follow-up questions. We're always going to have some introduction text in a chapter, and then, like it says in how to use this plan, if you just want to read the goals related to livable, resilient, equitable, every single chapter will have a blue box like this. You can just flip through and look for blue. Do that. If you want to know some of the key facts, look for red. There they are. If you want to know what public engagement told us, look for green. That's what that's going to look like. If you want to keep reading, feel free. We've got more words, facts and figures to back up the 3 things to know, more pretty pictures. And then what we will do, this one's got a lot because it's all our demographic information, is when we're all ready to go at the end, and we've edited all those objective strategies and actions in the big table that's going to be chapter 18, we'll put the chapter specific ones in yellow at the end. So if there's just one subject you're interested in, you want to go all the way right through to the action list, you can do that just in that chapter. So that's what it's going to start looking like, except there'll be 17 of those, plus chapter 0 in the front and front matter, and then chapter 18 implementation table at the end. And that's what we'll be bringing back to you, showing you what the Planning Commission has as a hearing draft after April 15th, and hopefully moving forward over the summer. That's all I got. Anybody? You want to come on up? I'll stop my share so that we're on screen.
So like Matt said, this is absolutely an immense amount of work between now and the 15th. But I do really think, and I really appreciate you all reading it in the detail you did, and providing the input. I think that the action words are really, I hope the action words are really helpful. They, I think, bring a lot of clarity, and I just want to take one little step back and just remind everyone that the way that the Planning Commission went about this and that the staff went about writing this is to hopefully come to a place where the plan can be used by town staff to organize their work over that 8-year period, right? That's the purpose of this document in a practical manner. And so when you are reading it, think about that, think about those those departments picking up these pieces and looking at them and working that into their work plan. going forward a little bit from there, evaluate. I agree with you a little bit, Jean. Of course, I like the fund for better, but I think evaluate is really important in a number of those spaces where we do need to decide, and yet not just have it be a like Matt was saying, yeah, we looked at it. It has to go in front of a decision-making body. And I think that's the piece that for me is really important when you're reading the action words, and that's the part about funding. When it says fund, like Matt said, the Planning Commission is not expecting the Select Board to stamp it now and say over the next 8 years we're gonna fund all this stuff that says fund. But I do really wanna impress upon everyone that I think it is important that if we are saying in this document that we're going to fund it or attempt to fund it, then the question will be openly asked and debated and either decided yes or no by the Select Board within our operating capital budgets or put forward to the voters for bond. I don't think we should delineate that specifically necessarily in the plan, because that's a decision that has to be made by this body in the moment, whatever that moment is. This current moment being a very interesting one, right, with federal money being very different than we were used to. But I don't think, what I don't want to see is for us to sort of not bring it to that point, so that we are telling the residents of Williston, we heard you, you said you wanted this community center, we put this in the plan, we prioritized this in the plan, we brought it forward for funding, and we decided yes to fund it, no to not, so that we are very transparent with taxpayers and the folks who contributed to this about what that very clear decision was, and it wasn't just we just never considered that. So I think that's when I think about funding, I think that is how I'm thinking about it, and like Matt said, if we need to make that clear in the definition, we can, but I think it's really important that we're showing Williston residents, you said that was important, you said this was our priority, we put it in the plan, we adopted it in the plan and said we're gonna fund it. And in the moment, whenever it came up, the decision was made to do it or not, and this was how. And then a piece that we talked about tonight is there will be probably an annual tracking and update to that big table that you read that says, oh, this was done, or this was considered, and people, whatever department or group was working on it wants to reconsider it next year, or they decided no, and so check that box. We looked at this, we decided no. So that's really clear to folks that, again, we're working through the to-do list. That's all.
Shayla, I saw because I did spend a lot of time with that red line yesterday. My eyes will never be the same. You had quite a few little comments that said prioritize, you wanted to say prioritize, and I'm not quite sure, how does prioritize in your mind work with these other, because it is one of them, but action words, but I wasn't quite sure.
So when I was saying that, I was asking staff to put it in that top 20 people. That's what I meant,
okay.
Not the verb. Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Not to confuse it.
Yeah, we kept prioritize as an action verb because there were a few actions that were really things that you'd want to give prominence to while you were carrying out some other action. So when we define prioritize, there's a few where it's prioritize diversity on town boards and committees when populating them with people or something like that. So it's you're really doing something else, but let's make this part of it.
That makes sense. That's good.
So it made sense to keep it as its own thing. But prioritize in terms of comments was get it up.
I should have used another word.
Sorry to call you out on your comments.
No.
That's not fair.
No, it's fine. Does anybody else?
Great.
I did, first of all, thanks to whoever typed in my 6 pages of comments into the document. I think my name was not on them, so I know someone else did it. And I thought you guys did a great job, but from the comments I read and the responses and everything of trying to just deal with the comments, this, yes, this can be softer without having to go back and ask a million questions or whatever. So I think my concerns were addressed mostly, which was great. I do have to say, there were some, in addressing some of the comments, it looked like there was new words put in, which I did not get a chance to go and read all over the new stuff, so that's probably this week's issue, but the ones that were just updated or taken out made a lot of sense to me. You guys obviously put a ton of work into that. Thank you very much. Mike had a really good question about why there isn't a chapter on public safety. I thought that was a good question. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
So we have a town services and programs chapter, and I met with Eric today to talk about some added public safety objectives and action items that should go in there. You could have a whole chapter on public safety. The only reason we have the chapters titled the way they are for the most part is because we're responding to the required elements coming out of state law and just trying to organize the plan roughly in that same way. So they don't have a public safety required element, but it's encapsulated in town departments and services. That said, you should see some new objectives and a couple of new strategies and actions specifically responding to public safety and the development of additional public safety capability over the life of this plan. So
That'd be great.
yeah,
This is pretty important.
I got some comments today from my boss. I wrote them down. We'll be typing them in.
Thank you, Gene.
The only other comment I just wanted to make, maybe this has to do with public outreach, and it's hard to do with 17 chapters, but having looked at 96 pages of tables and then reading chapter 1, it's like so much more pleasant to read chapter 1. So I was just wondering if there's a way to think about as you present this to the community to try to put it out there in chunks, you know? Because if you gave me three chapters out in Front Porch Forum, here's the links, pick one, you know, and they could be really different. They don't have to be 1, 2, 3, they could be 1, 4, 9, but somebody who really wants to deep dive in energy versus somebody who really wants to deep dive on land use policy, you know, that might just be a way to get someone who might click on the link and read 3 or 4 pages and not pick up a 100-page document.
We can do that. So we have all 17 as the short versions that we showed you about a month ago on the website right now, but we can turn those over to hearing draft versions as we've got them ready.
As you get them ready, yeah, because I think the introduction in the beginning is really makes the context is helpful. I've been whining about the amount of work I did, and I just have reading it. I didn't have to write anything. Massive amount of work.
I just wanted to comment on that last thing a little bit, which is that our town departments are well organized and come to you for budget reasons every year. And so to me, the things to look for the most in the town plan are the things that aren't covered by our current organizational structure. And an example would perfectly well be that before we had an energy coordinator and energy committee, you wouldn't expect the chief of police or the public works director to come in and tell you something about saving energy. You know, we didn't have a structure that gave voice to that. And so to me, I just hope as you look at this that there will be advocacy from within and to look for, did we cover the things that don't have advocacy within? And for us, a lot of that was things like equity, like when we're looking at paths and trails, are they near where people live who maybe don't have a car? You know, that's the kind of thing that's not in our current organizational structure, doesn't come out. And so would ask you to look for the things that are not within our current structure, make sure they're emphasized enough. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
If I may, the planning department's outlined a schedule for additional select board discussions in your meetings moving ahead. Just looking for feedback from the board. Is that a schedule you'd like to plug into your plan in the coming months, just as we schedule, you know, this will take a good amount of select board's time, so I just want to build around that in the next few months.
Well, let me look at it again, because I was thinking like, I get 2 more weeks, and then I'm just kind of listening to other people's opinions, so. Can you maybe articulate what you expect the select board to be doing over the next several months?
Sure. So right now, between now and, say, the end of next week, the 11th, anything you read that you come across that you want to highlight for us, anything you notice that we can catch and make an edit on right now, we'd love to hear about that. because that'll go into what the Planning Commission sees. Once we get a thumbs up from the Planning Commission, hopefully on April 15th, to put this out in front of the world, that's the warned hearing draft. But the very first thing we're going to do after we hold that hearing at the Planning Commission is talk about things they want to change before they hand it off to you. So in that whole 30-plus days from April 15th to May 20th, especially from April 15th to, say, May 15th, you can still be reading drafts and noticing things and wanting, us to bring them to the attention of the Planning Commission so that they can tweak what they actually send forward to you. So there is some opportunity to get in there before it's in front of you for that informational meeting.
Okay.
And then we can continue to evolve from there. So there is time within there, but we deal with these 30-day warning periods in statute that stretch us out a bit.
And if you get into your formal public hearing process, where you need to have 2 of those public hearings, if you make a substantive change at one of those hearings, make sure I'm outlining this right, Matt, because there's 2 hearings, you have to rewarn a new hearing. So if you make a substantive change after hearing 1, do you then have hearing 2 and hearing 3 at that point?
No, I think you can just have hearing 2. Okay. You can't make any more changes within 15 days of hearing 2. Okay. So first week of August is sort of the drop dead for changing anything that gets heard at that final hearing. If you keep changing after that, you don't have to have 2 more, but you have to have 1 more beyond that.
With bringing the select board into this process early with the Planning Commission, it helps to, have these conversations before you're in more of a, a formal hearing arena where you have other timelines that could be extended at that point, just to for the board to keep that in mind.
But I think to Jean's question, the bulk of the work is now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then once we get to July and August, hopefully it'll be like, oh, there's a typo.
Yeah.
Or not. No, so before the end of next week, the new stuff that I haven't had a chance to review. But then really we have the May 6th meeting would be the one we would have time for a discussion on. Right? So that would be probably the only one that would be a select board planning commission discussion meeting.
Yep.
After that, they're public hearings.
Yep. So what we can talk about on May 6th is, hey, Planning Commission, we've seen the draft you're starting your hearing process with. We've got some suggestions for what you might want to do with that during that process before you transmit it back to us, the select board. And so May 6th is the opportunity to really do that. And again, hopefully we're getting down to smaller and smaller levels of change at that point because we've talked over it. There shouldn't really be anything in the hearing draft that's a big surprise other than it looking nice compared to what we've shown you so far at this point.
So I won't stretch this out any longer. I'm sure it'll become all clear to me, as most things do, as it goes through the process. But if there was something that the select board is feeling uncomfortable with, and I know it came out, so I'll use this as an example, but the one about requiring businesses to have their own daycare. And if that was just still in the draft, and it was something that, like, well, what would the process sort of be? We should probably have something like internally, like, is there anything in this draft that we really need to have a discussion and nail it down? Right?
Yep.
Okay.
I guess I'm a little lost in the process would be at that point too, does the select board have, I guess it's a lack of process question, but does the select board make the change and then warn the public hearing on what they decided?
So what you could do, let's say it's May 6th. You've looked at what the Planning Commission warned that they're going to start their public hearing with on May 20th. But on May 6th, you've seen that and you say there's something in here I think you should take out. On May 20th, the Planning Commission holds their hearing, they take comment on that draft, and they say, we're ready to transmit back to the select board. Oh, but staff, what you transmit to them, delete that thing they didn't like. That's perfectly okay. So they can hear you on May 6th, comment on the warned draft, and they can choose to modify that draft during their hearing into what they send to you. Then you you know, have that informational meeting. You could have that informational meeting and say, you know, this is great, but we aren't ready to warn a hearing on this. We would like a few more things to be changed. That would trigger the planning commission sort of rehearing, and, you know, it obviously lengthens our timeline, but you could do that. You could also get to your first hearing on July 15th and say, we heard from the public and somebody raised an issue that I really want to make a substantive change. That's fine. We have time between July 15th and August 19th to go to I think it's a early August planning commission meeting, say, hey, the select board wanted to change this. They'd like your advice. As long as that hearing draft isn't modified after it's like August 4th or something like that, you can stay on target with the 19th. So there's just rules about what happens when changes get made at different levels of the process.
That was very, very nice. I would love to know your bigger changes by May 6th. And like Matt said, obviously something could come out of the public or something could come up that's new. Right. And like that's why we do the process, that's great. But like if there's something in here that we have presented to you before May 6th, it would be really, really awesome to know that now, so that we can address it, and we can either be difficult and send it to you anyway, or decide to take it out. But I think that's really the kind of date to look at or to think about for like, no, really that action item, we don't want that in here. Versus like the wording's funny, or, you know, let's think about this, like that can kind of trickle on for a while longer.
Yeah, just the reality timing-wise is that you won't transmit it to us until after our April 15th meeting, and May 6th is our next meeting. So we won't know as a body if we want to change anything, right? Because we haven't met.
You won't have considered it as a body.
Oh, as a body, I see what you're saying.
So that might be something we want to think about, if there's a public way we can exchange our own ideas and come May 6th ready, but it'd have to be public, right, to, you know.
It'd have to be a meeting.
Yep. And I don't know, having not seen it yet, I haven't even read we don't even have the chapters, so.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of stuff to do, and luckily it's 3 weeks. But we would not have met, that's my, so.
Sometimes what's difficult too is just understanding what level of detail to get into, like when you mentioned babysitting, that brought up some things to me, like traffic congestion, and also, you know, how do you force a business that pays minimum wage to pay more money for affordable housing? You know, these are things that, you know, these are dreams that we want, but things that are reality we can't.
Yeah, and actually, in a way, just, not to cut you off, but just to kind of agree with you, it's almost like the two bigger issues you put on here, I don't think they're that big issues, they just need some conversation to get to wording that we're comfortable with, which is hard to do on, well, first you have to decide which 7 or 8 items are worth, you know, we need to discuss this, I'm not comfortable enough to just approve this the way it's written, and then have some time to have those discussions. Or maybe there won't be any, I don't know, but, you know, it might be.
Could that be on May 6th?
We won't even
that's
have,
a real
we won't,
question.
I guess if it's allowable that maybe it's sort of, yeah, we would have to, I think, send our comments and let Ted decide these are all the comments I got, and these are the ones I think are worth discussing.
I don't think that's the role of the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I was really
I think
comfortable with it
the
too.
manager can fill that role. You know, if board members are giving manager independent feedback, then, you know, I can do, you know, the qualitative analysis on that and see, you know, are there, you know, there's different numberings for objectives in each chapter, you know, 4 board members had a problem with this one, let's make sure we talk about that on the next agenda.
Yeah, it's just that some of them are not quite like objective 9 should say prioritize versus this, but we need to have a discussion about like affordable housing or something, so.
Yeah, and the other issue is that each member of the select board is their own select board member. So I don't know anywhere where we can say, well, four people said this, so this is what's going to be on the agenda. I mean, the agenda gets set by the town manager and the chair, but everybody has the right to put input into what the agenda is, and everybody has the right to make a motion. It doesn't have to be even anything that's on the agenda. So I don't know if we can delineate, well, okay, if 3 of us have this problem, then we'll put it on the agenda, but if 4, then we won't.
I was thinking, a summary listing.
Yeah.
Even for like, okay, one board member had raised this point, and then everyone has a summary of where everybody's comments were. But it may or may not play out in reality just based on the reviews.
Well,
we can think about that.
Would there be anything, I mean, our next meeting is April, what?
15th.
15th? Is that tax day?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Used to be tax day? We can talk about this, but maybe we can reserve a chunk of time on April 15th, even though we don't have the final stuff, just to have more conversation, even informal, but maybe reserve that. And then May 6th, I'm thinking that this is going to consume the vast majority of the meeting. So, we can change our agenda within those schedules to address it more than we would if it were just one of 12 agenda items.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I will say too that 99% of what you'll be talking about on May 6th is going to exist pretty much by the end of the day on April 11th.
Okay.
Staff's going to kill me.
Yeah.
That's what we're cranking
Good,
on
it'll take
right
me
now.
3 weeks to read it all.
And I like the idea of publicizing each chapter as they're available for people to go and read, and getting it out on Williston2050.com and all that. So we'll focus on that.
Important stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's look at the schedule. There's plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, there's some survey tools we could implement too that might speed up the feedback process.
All right. Okay.
Great.
So does that take us as far as we can go tonight? Or that we should go? So, all right. Okay.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
It sounds like a cliche, but the amount of work that everybody's been doing on this is prodigious and impressive. So,
Thank you.
Thank you for keeping it so short.
You're welcome, I think.
No one has ever said anything, no one
Until
said
they
ever.
Well, it could be 300 pages, I'm sure.
It will be at the
Oh,
end.
you mean the document itself?
It might be that long, but there will be
Yeah.
lots of white space and pictures.
And pretty pictures.
So that does bring us up to select board goals and discussion scheduled for, we're only about 20 minutes behind, and this is a 20-minute item, but I think we should probably just keep it on the agenda and address it. So unless people have a strong opinion, let's just go ahead and do that. Eric?
This is a document we started last year, so I'm bringing it to you a little bit earlier now that we have this format flushed out. So this was establishing policy priorities for, I'm calling it the business year, town meeting to town meeting. And we adopted this select board adopted this for the first time last year. Its intent is to prioritize the policy work of the town manager and supporting the select board in the year ahead by providing direction to me as our public body. This encompasses several goals and objectives, many in different stages of development. I had in the manager's report, your last meeting packet, just kind of where things were at the end of that business year to kind of put a bow on where things ended up. What I'm bringing before you this evening is that same document format. A number of these things that we were we're still working on for the library project. And I've added a few new things that I've highlighted here. I didn't add an extensive amount, just given some of these larger projects, and kind of there's still a lot of work ahead on them. But this is the start the discussion tonight. There's no action suggested, but I'm seeking feedback from the board on this work plan essentially. It'll help me and prioritize what myself and staff works on from a policy level over these next 11 months leading up to town meeting day 26. As a select board, are there some things you really want to make sure we're focusing and working on this year? we just had the town plan conversation. That's a huge lift for the board coming up with your meetings in the next 11 months. Continued conversation about the library project, a number of other things. But this can always get revised during the year too. We change some things, and we'll say we're an efficient group, but we only have so much bandwidth too. So we'd love to accomplish as much as we can, but as you provide direction on this and you work through this document, if there were some top priorities for the town manager to be focused on, it helps me just prioritize, so I make sure I'm meeting your expectations throughout the year of what you want to see at a policy level. The best we can. You know, things always come up as we dig into stuff, and it may take more time, may take less time, may deviate from where we're planning originally, but this is a tool to help the board have this conversation at a policy level. And I really see, as we work on this in the coming years, you know, the town plan becomes a great tool to help the board think about those different elements for prioritization on these objectives. From this is essentially your work plan to direct me for the year ahead. So always looking for feedback on the format here, and now it's the second year we've done this, so there's always ways to improve these processes and items as we go. So leave it to the board. Thoughts and feedback?
The only thing, I had mentioned it maybe a few months back now, but I see it as even greater priority now than ever is looking into, our town policies and with an equity lens and a lens for, justice and inclusion as well, and really, going through things with a fine-tooth comb, refining things, possible trainings, and I had brought up the possibility of establishing a formal committee within town rather than, kind of an advisory board, which is what we have now. And so, would like to, add that.
I'd support that.
Yep.
Yeah,
I see that I have the line there, yeah, but I really feel like it needs to be.
Or is it identified? We have discussion identified and in process.
Yeah, so I would like to, make that the higher priority, yeah. And again, look at the possibility of standing a committee. I look at it, really with, in terms of the town policies and really, kind of how our housing or our energy committee is, looking at meeting with the other committees and when they're creating things like a town plan and advising us on language and ways to create more equitable policies as a town, and to make sure that we are really, reflecting the varied needs of community members, and that committee would be, hopefully established of as wide and diverse representation of our town as possible, including folks who maybe work in town and can't, afford to live here and things like that, and really, in my mind, that is a priority.
I'm just thinking ahead, like a community center that we're talking about, and, and other, things that we're going to be doing in the future, maybe developing more partnerships with private enterprises, like working with rehab gym, for example. If the town wants a swimming pool, working with someone who also has a private enterprise that could use the pool as well. I think the town could do more with partnerships with private enterprises. I don't personally like seeing the town getting into private enterprise itself, but I think the town could do more with, working with private enterprises in collaboration.
So like, Mike, is that on like a programming front? Just any examples that come to mind?
I was just thinking like a swimming pool, you find, like find some of the rehabs, gyms, physical therapy around here. Maybe doctors' offices would, something, like if we had more collaborations with private enterprises, like, you talk about, like if you want a performing arts center, working with another organization, I think of like Lyric Theater or another theater company or something.
Yes, it might fit under the sustainable budget bullet, and I agree, it could be fleshed out, but I'm really continue to struggle with how to fit everything we need to do into a budget. So, I mean, I was actually, I'm very concerned about sort of the short term, and I was going to talk to you offline, Eric, to have you come and talk to us about, I'm concerned if we get the library, we won't get the radio tower, because we've got one before the other, and there's some things that I think it would help me if I sort of understand all of the, especially these big capital needs that have to get voted, probably have to get voted on, and realistically, is that all going to happen? Should we be more aggressive about looking for other funding? It would be, just as a, for instance, the radio tower could be like our parking lot. No one's going to want to vote yes on a bond for a radio tower, right? Library, yes, but that's just something that they don't care about, and don't care, it's not the right word, but it's not something you're going to get a positive vote. So we have to come up with an alternate funding model, and what that looks like, and maybe that's a little bit what Mike's talking about with the community center. If we really want a community center with a pool, there might have to be other funding mechanisms than just straight up bond for it. But that would be, I would like to see that sort of laid out with when they might happen and how much a bond of a certain amount would cost each year, and like weigh that against our grand list outlook and say, well, all these things are great, but they are going to double our tax rate or whatever. And so therefore, if we want them all, we're going to have to be more aggressive on finding other ways to fund them. But I don't know that because I just haven't laid it out in my own head or, put all the data on a piece of paper. The pool, the community center with pool is in our plan. We might decide to leave it in or not leave it in, but if it's in our plan with fund next to it, we're going to have some real discussions about what that looks like. My thoughts.
Yeah, just with, with that example, like, what type of special revenue fund is able to be, raised for,
right.
For programming and underwriting the operating budget of the facility through, rentals and lessons and things like that. And, if it's it's an $800,000 bond payment, that's a lot of money to raise through that revenue source. And there's probably a proportion out there, but it's not a huge proportion.
Right.
The big thing with a community center and a swimming pool is town has no idea how to take care of it. You know what I mean? You don't build something that you don't know how to take care of. You don't have the staff to take care of it.
Well, it would mean more staff.
Yeah, we need more
Right,
staff in
but-
the operating
Yeah.
budget. Has to
Rackets
factor
Edge
in.
couldn't keep the pool here in Williston. We had a pool, we had a gym. Didn't work. So it's got to be something. I don't know.
Well, there'll be a lot more discussion before we get to whether or not it's in there or not, but
Like
it's.
a radio tower, I don't know, maybe there's a cell service that would want to put some cell panels up on it or something. You build a big tower, must be other uses that could be used for it.
So the broader, I guess,
That-
thought that is exploring the opportunity for partnerships.
Correct.
In our objectives for projects and capital projects.
Yes. Keep it simple. I think it'll,
Yeah, we can certainly evaluate those if it's something that makes sense in the context of the project. At least to see if there's a potential there, and as a government, if that, that relationship with a private entity is permissible, and just, like co-locating a facility on, a piece of public infrastructure to get a revenue stream from it. Those are all good things to look at.
My only other thought on this, without having looked at that as a beginning discussion, is how would you, Eric, so we're shortly, in another month, going to have 20 high priority items, which may not all be on here. How would you kind of marry those two in the document? Because I'm not sure when something falls off, does it only fall off this when it's done, or when it is sort of in a stage that you don't have to manage it day to day, or we don't have to manage it day to day? Like, when do you decide something falls off, or are you just going to add 20 more items?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, I see a lot of this is operational, kind of, okay, we had this objective, we were able to accomplish it, and some's going to be ongoing operational needs. So some of that, might start with like a policy development, but, then that policy is in place, and the town manager is going to implement that policy, the select board, and those policies all should be, reviewed in a certain time to see if there's amendments and updates to be had. But, that might not be, you created the thing, you're doing the thing, then you don't need to keep it on the work plan every year. You should have a timing of when we need to revisit that and see if there's this is how it went. We adopted this a couple of years ago. Are there any, staff will feel the pressure points in it and bring forward amendments. So that could kind of happen that way, to say, we adopted this policy, like the temporary event ordinance amendments. Like, we've been using that space for a couple of years now. There's likely some changes to be made to that. How do we want to prioritize that within all the, meeting for about 2 hours twice a month? How does the select board want to prioritize those items? I'm not really answering your question, I feel like.
No, I mean, just like on the first page, the glacier parcel land transfer / public space, is there work that we have to do? Is it something you have to do, or is that something that at this point is in the hands of the planning department and can come off the list, right?
There'll be some legal work for the select board just to, approve the acquisition of the property.
Yeah. So are these all meant to be things that we are going to have on our work plan at some point this year?
That ideally, but I think, I guess I should restate that.
I mean, yes, no, I mean, not like, I mean, it's okay if the answer is, if it is yes, then I feel better about the list, because while it's one thing to manage a, seasoned professional, I don't need to know everything you do on this list, so.
Yeah, I think some of this, where especially kind of in process and development, some of those longer term projects that have a long runway to them, I think it must have been 3 or 4 years back now when the select board, first looked for the feasibility study for the library and the community center to see where that went. And, that took quite a while to get us to this point. So those can stretch over multiple years.
Right, but it might be like on Ted's fading fast, so I gotta go quick. Something like the community center, it would help if it was like maybe a shorter term goal,
I see what you're saying. Kind of, what are those milestones for the larger project?
Yeah, something that we really want to accomplish this year, as opposed to something that could be just on here with the same bullet for 3 years.
Yeah, it's maybe like trying to find a preferred site.
Right.
Something like
Right,
that.
yeah.
That's helpful.
And then at some point, if something is on our top 20 list and not on here, why? They don't all have to be on here. If they're being managed by a committee and won't get to us, then that's fine, but it might just be a cross-check.
But I think that's a good point too, with thinking about the town plan, where there's leads in it. Some of it's policy work by committees, and those committees work, are advisory to the select board. So, kind of calling out kind of high-level policy work that you want prioritized, like the clean heat ordinance that came up last year. That was brought forward by residents and referred to a committee by the select board. And the select board has to prioritize that work of its policy advisory committees. How engaged do you want to be in setting those policy development agendas for your advisory committees versus how much do you want those committees to self-identify those priorities? Then it can be a situation where they transmit something saying, hey, we worked on this, here's a draft policy, but there's all this other items that the select board needs to work through, and, you know, I work with the chair to try to prioritize these items, but if we kind of have this high priority list, where does it fit in that list?
Right. Yeah.
I don't have a great answer right now. We're just kind of raising it as, you know,
No,
it's
it's a starting
workflow and
point. Yeah,
operational
starting
for
point.
policy making.
I don't think this document would be able to answer that.
No.
So did you get sufficient direction or?
Yeah, that's helpful. I can flesh out some of these a little bit more, you know, add some. Sounds like nothing on this list the board wants to, you know, still, these are all good goals and priorities to have. There's nothing to take away from this.
There's nothing to stop working on, it's just more a matter of, is it reach the level of, should it be on our list versus your list, that's all.
Yeah. Good way to look at it.
It's helpful. I'll go back through it with that feedback and kind of revise this working draft.
Yeah, let's put this on an agenda next handful of meetings. And,
Not May 5th?
No, not. No. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Now the hardest one.
Yeah, that'll bring us to the volunteer appointment.
Two great candidates.
It's a win-win, no matter what.
I'm hopeful that they both sound very motivated to kind of, you know, give back to the town and volunteer in some way. So I'm hopeful that, you know, we'll benefit from them on a different committee if this is not the committee they end up on.
You probably didn't need to lead with the cemetery committee.
It was alphabetical. It was the first on the list. I know. Yeah. Do you have a?
Do we vote first?
Well, I think we should have a discussion. But if actually, do people want to make a nomination and then we'll have a discussion, or?
I thought that they were both highly qualified. The one thing I will say that I think, you know, kind of stood out to me was that, you know, Carrie in particular represented a demographic of a parent of younger children. And so I think could bring that perspective to the committee. But then, you know, also within her professional career, works with, you know, older, you know, college age students and things like that. And you know, so for that reason alone, I think, you know, I would lean towards Carrie, but.
I would point out that Susan starts off, my daughter loves playing basketball through Parks and Recreation.
Yes.
She had a young child as well.
Yes, yep.
And I thought of Susan Hayes because she had older children for the same reason.
I was just struck by, and these are both positives, but Carrie's absolute enthusiasm for the community center project, which is going to be needed if that moves forward, and Susan's, I thought, really lovely balance of looking for needs and trying to balance everybody's needs and making sure they have ways to. So I thought those were the two strengths, which I struggle with.
Yeah, me too. Actually, it's funny, I noticed exactly that. I thought Susan coming in second on the question, talking about the need to balance, et cetera, was obviously sincere, and I thought it was well thought out, because it'd be easy just to say, yeah, this would be a great thing too, but I don't know that we've determined whether it's a great thing or not. It would be a great thing. It's a great thing whether we can afford it, I guess is how I should phrase it.
Yeah.
But.
Does Ellie have a comment,
Yeah.
Ellie?
I don't know. I'm going back and forth for a lot of the same reasons. I think they're both.
Yeah,
really
it's like
strong
we have
candidates.
Sorry, Ellie, if you'll repeat yourself.
We've got to put you on stereo here.
Oh, sorry. I was agreeing with the rest of the board that I think they're both very strong, very qualified candidates. I think I would lean towards Susan barely, because just like what Ted was just saying, that how she talked about balancing community needs and trying to, engage the community and figure out what the starting point is at. But I think they're both really great.
We can get Carrie on the community center committee.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest parts. So it sounds like there's mostly consensus. Susan?
We call it light consensus.
Light
Consensus light.
consensus. Yes. Is anybody comfortable making a motion?
I move to appoint Susan Hayes to the Recreation and Parks Committee for an unexpired 3-year term through June 30th, 2025, with great thanks to Carrie Shackett for stepping.
Well phrased. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion on the motion? As a point of order, Ellie, I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you on this issue and any of the other issues. It's been a while since we've had, it's my fault, but I'm sorry if you felt like you had to scream to be heard or you missed out on something tonight, and I take responsibility for that. So, but that being said, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Hearing no nays, Susan Hayes has been appointed. So.
And we will be reaching out to folks whose terms are up for renewal on boards and committees. So certainly that list we have right now, there could be some additions. I don't know everyone who's up on the Recreation and Parks Committee, but staff's working on some targeted outreach and for these positions. I think we have a DRB candidate who's going to interview at the next meeting, I think on April 15th. So yeah, folks are working hard. And yeah, we'll continue to get the word out. Great opportunities to serve the town. Manager's report is already covered. Yep. Yeah, nothing else.
That would bring us to other business. Is there any other business?
No other business for me.
No, sorry, wait for my other.
Okay. Final thoughts on items from this meeting.
I wanted to compliment the chair on his rephrasing of the recusing the oneself comment. I thought you did a great job. I have like 3 different versions here because it's like I am not going to let a whole other year go by and ask the same question the exact same way. But I liked your, how would you recognize it, and what would you do about it? I thought it was an excellent phrasing. So thank you very much for.
Well, that's high praise indeed.
It is.
Any other final thoughts? If not, then we are adjourned.